Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar, Best Practices when Using Virtual Hierarchies in IBM Planning Analytics. Looks like the attendee has stopped incrementing, and we'll get started. All right, a few quick notes as we get going. Today's event is being recorded for future viewing, and we will be posting the video online in the near future. During the presentation, all attendees will be muted. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A section. We'll try to answer them as we go along, but if we're unable to, then we will certainly answer them afterwards. We know that some of you on the call are here out of curiosity or maybe just for some general education. And we also know that some of you are here because you specifically have an initiative in this area. Either way, we would really appreciate taking just 15 minutes or so over the next week or so for a chat. So in the next day or so, myself or one of my colleagues will be reaching out to you to get some feedback and have a brief conversation. So, Rob? So today's presenters, my name is Lee Lazarow. I am the Planning Analytics Projects Leader, and I am joined today by Rob Gordy, our Chief Technology Officer, and Tara Burns, one of our PA Senior Consultants. For purposes of today, we're going to talk a little bit. We'll introduce ourselves, talk about Revelwood, let you know who we are, why you're here, why it makes sense to listen to us. And then we'll jump right into it. We're going to talk about this concept of hierarchies, what they are, and why you'd want to use them. We're going to give a demonstration today to show you how to use them, how to both set them up and how to use them as part of the planning analytics experience. And then we'll talk a little bit about things that you want to consider while you're setting these up and when you're using those. And then we'll talk a little bit more about next steps. Okay. So to start, talk a little bit about who we are. Okay. Revelwood is an IBM Gold business partner. We've been in business for over 25 years, helping FP&A professionals solve their business problems. We are an award-winning IBM Business Analytics partner, and we have done hundreds of successful IBM Planning Analytics implementations. They have been worldwide. They have been with all types of companies that span various industries and various sizes. We have a very deep bench of certified PA consultants, and we pride ourselves in bringing not only the technical expertise, but also the business expertise needed to help you with your FP&A needs. Okay. So with that being said, I'm now going to turn this over to Rob Gordy to get things started.
Thanks a lot, Lee. So yeah, I'm going to start talking about the topic at hand. And I'd like to first give a little bit of background regarding the history of hierarchies within planning analytics. Some of you may be longtime users of planning analytics. And when I say longtime users, I mean using it from the days when it was called TM1. And this concept of hierarchies was introduced about 4 years ago by IBM when they did a major rehaul of the entire TM1 application. They renamed it to Planning Analytics. They added new features, user interfaces, such as Planning Analytics Workspace and Planning Analytics for Excel. And at that same time, or around that time, they also modified the engine that works, behind that works in the background, and added this new feature called hierarchies. So the number one thing to start off with is that we, Revelwood, as well as most other people who worked with TM1, used to use the word hierarchy to refer to a roll-up structure. So in a single dimension, you can have multiple roll-up structures and take the same elements and just consolidate them in different ways. And usually that was referred to as a hierarchy. The thing that we're talking about today is not that. It is related to it, but it is not the same thing. Therefore, for the purposes of this presentation, when I say hierarchy, I'm referring to the new feature. When I talk about the old concept of roll-up structures, I'll probably use that term, roll-up structures. Revelwood has also taken to using another name for hierarchies, this new feature, and that is virtual dimensions. And you'll see why we tend to call it that in a few minutes. So why are we having this conversation? What we found is that over the last couple of years, as we've upgraded dozens and dozens of clients from TM1 up to Planning Analytics, they heard about this new feature called Hierarchies, but they didn't understand what they are, why you use them, how to even create them, and then how to use them in the user interfaces. The purpose of this presentation is to answer all those questions. Okay, so let's start off with what is a hierarchy. A hierarchy is it will feel a lot like those consolidation structures, the roll-up structures that I talked about a few minutes ago. It's this idea that you're taking your base level elements and you're consolidating them in a different way than, let's say, the default roll-up structure that you have in the dimension. So examples would be organizations in your company that might be rolled up by region, but also by vice president or by the people responsible. Or accounts can have an existing chart of accounts as well as a new chart of accounts, etc. Right? The example that is probably easiest to understand is something like products, which can roll up by color, by size, by type, by any other attribute of the product. So how is it different than the idea of alternate roll-up structures within a single dimension? Well, right there is the key. When you're using roll-up structures, you're within a single dimensional structure. But when you're using the new feature called hierarchies, it's like having virtual dimensions. You are able to have multiple consolidation structures and use them as if they were a different dimension. Okay, so what are the benefits of doing that? Well, first of all, being able to, of course, see your data along these other consolidation structures. As I said, you can kind of do that without using the new hierarchies feature. What you can't do is that you can't look at that data using these other hierarchy structures and then compare that or look at it in conjunction with the traditional structure that you use. So as an example, if you have products that roll up by color, size, and type, and you wanted to see a report that had the various...
If I could jump in for a moment, I think
yes.
you might be on the wrong slide.
Oh. I'm talking about what is a hierarchy. I can't... hopefully I'm on the right slide.
Thanks.
Yeah. Hopefully that was the slide everybody was seeing, but thank you, Lee. So the point is, if you wanted to see a grid where you had all the different types down the rows and the colors across the columns, you're able to do that with the new hierarchy feature. You could not do that in the old world. Okay. So what are the benefits? Well, number one, you're saving memory, right? Because your cube size does not change. Okay, if you were literally adding new dimensions to a cube, you would end up increasing that cube size. Also, you don't need as many dimensions in the cube. Okay, these new hierarchies and virtual dimensions are kind of a bonus that you get for zero cost. Okay, you're able to use existing attributes to create these new hierarchies. So with either through the user interface or through Turbo Integrator, you're able to convert attributes into a new hierarchy or a new consolidation structure. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, now I know why Lee was suggesting that I was on the wrong slide. is that you can use multiple hierarchies in one report. One other item that I didn't put on this slide, but I will mention, and that is in the past, if you decided to add that you wanted to do analysis via in this way of an existing dimension, but you wanted to have it in two different ways, you would literally have to change the cube structure. And that was a major overhaul. With hierarchies, you can do it on the fly. You do not have to modify your cube structure at all. So we have many customers that are already using this. Here are a few examples. The key takeaway here is that number one, this is a new functionality within Planning Analytics. Therefore, it works across all types of models. It also works across all industries. So we have some clients that are using it because well, for that reason that I mentioned a few minutes ago, that they decided after the models were all created that they also wanted to, let's say, analyze their data by something new. And as long as that something new is directly related to one of their dimensions, they're able to add it on the fly with almost no cost and no impact to their current models. Other clients, by the way, simply find this easier to use than, for example, having multiple cubes that really show the same data. Okay. So we're about to get into our demonstration. So at this point, what I'd like to do is hand it over to Tara Burns, and she'll do the demonstration for us. Tara?
Yes, sorry.
Great.
Hi, my name is Tara, and I'm a consultant at Revelwood. And we are going to walk through 3 different ways to create hierarchies by attribute. Before we start, I just want to, there's a technical note that there is a parameter that needs to be set, and it is the enable new hierarchy creation parameter on the TM1 configuration file, which would enable this feature. It's defaulted to false, and it needs to be set to true to enable the feature. On my screen, you will see I have opened 2 dimensions. I have the products dimension, which we're going to go into in detail, and I have the region dimension, which we're going to look at in a little bit. So the products dimension, we have here, you can see, since we have hierarchies enabled, there are 2 default hierarchies in this dropdown. There is a leaves hierarchy, which has the base level elements, and then we have the products hierarchy, which is just a total hierarchy of all the products based on their type. So you'll see all the bug sprays are in the insect repellent roll-up and so forth. So since we're going to create a hierarchy by attribute, we need to switch on the attribute mode by left clicking on this tag up top in the dimension editor. And you will see that we have an attribute called location made on this dimension. And to create the hierarchy, it's as simple as right clicking, and we have the option to create a hierarchy by this attribute. So we are going to do that. It is going to ask us if for sure we want to create a new hierarchy from the attribute. We are going to say OK. And you'll see over here on the left, there will be another hierarchy created. And then in our dropdown, you can see it flipped right over to this new hierarchy we just made with that easy method. So now you will see, instead of the products organized by type, they're actually organized by, in this case, country, which is the attribute we had on there. So this is great and fast, but there are limitations. So if we happen to want to change one of these attributes, some may be wondering if the hierarchy will refresh, and the answer is no. Once you run that, it's a static hierarchy. You can change all the attributes and the hierarchy does not refresh. If you did change it and then try to recreate that hierarchy again, like we had done, it's going to give us an error message that that hierarchy already exists. So that will not create another hierarchy. You pretty much have to go over here to location made, delete the hierarchy, and then go through that same process we just went through. But an alternative and a best practice that we suggest is to run a simple process where you will see we have 3 of the hierarchy functions in this process. It's very simple. Everything's in the prologue. There's no looping through the dimension. The 3 functions are in pink. We're going to check if the hierarchy already exists based on the dimension name and the attribute name. And if it exists, we're going to destroy it so that we can then recreate it in this case. Line 19 is the create hierarchy by attribute function, which just requires that we have the dimension name, the attribute name, the name of the bucket that we want anything without an attribute assigned to go to, and then the top level dimension root. So that would be the top level. So if we go back to the dimension, that top level will be all location made. And just so I can show you, if you do not specify an attribute, I'm going to minimize these so that you can see if you don't specify an attribute, it gets thrown into a bucket called other by default. Whereas if we ran this simple TI, that bucket would be none specified, which we can. The nice thing is you can actually make a name for the bucket that things get put into if they don't have an attribute, and you can make a name for the top level of the dimension or the hierarchy, sorry, that you would like. So you can make this name whatever you'd like. So that's great for a simple hierarchy where you just want the country and then the product. Let's say you had another dimension, which in this case is region, which actually groups these countries into the continent and then into a bucket called international or domestic, and maybe the tax department cares more about this structure. So we can run a more complex process to build the hierarchy where you would actually loop through. So you'll see, for all the developers out there, you'll see we're going to loop through. In this case, we're going to loop through the region dimension, and we are going to insert these elements into the hierarchy as we loop through the dimensions. So you will see, very similar to all the dimension manipulation functions in TM1, you will see hierarchy manipulation functions. So you will be able to insert the elements, and then on line 21, you would add the element to the roll up you would like, and then we loop through this whole dimension. So at the end of the day, we would loop through the region dimension, build out this structure, and then we would run another TI that would actually take this attribute and put this product into the dimension. So that would create more than just right now, you just have all location made and then the countries. In that case, you would have all locations, and then you could split into domestic, international, pick your country, and you'd have more than just the 3 levels. With the complex TI, you would be able to build something more than 3 levels, which the default just simple TI hierarchy by attribute just creates a 3-level dimension. So where that really matters, as Rob mentioned, is in exploration. We have just a cube view here, and we have product over here on the left, you can see the total of product, just the regular dimension by type. So we can, right click on this dimension. And you can actually replace this hierarchy, that's the total of product, with the new one we just created called location made. And you can see your numbers by country rather than product type. The main message of this webinar is to use and instead of or. So we could actually, instead of just replace the hierarchy, we can actually add a related hierarchy. So we can actually keep in the products by type and also see them by the country where they're made. This might come in handy too if you want to take country and flip it with your metrics. You can actually see now which products you're producing in which countries, and also where you're selling the products by country. If you have another, we actually have another dimension called country, which is separate. So it's almost like we've added a whole new dimension, as Rob mentioned before, to this cube without actually adding a dimension, without compromising any kind of performance. And we've also made it easy to see the products by location made. Now we will loop back to other considerations on the hierarchies. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Right. Thanks, Tara. So we'll bring the presentation back up.
I'll have that up 1 second.
Right. Yep.
Yep. Okay.
All right. So
So
now that we've seen, so thanks, Rob. So now that we've seen how to create the hierarchies, our next step is to consider how we want to use the hierarchies. So the first question that I typically like to ask myself is, when do I want to use each approach? I like to think of this answer as a simple and versus or question. Okay? Roll-up structures, or what we used to call alternate roll-ups, what Rob had mentioned earlier. That's a legacy tool, and it was designed to work the same way as a subset. So in that situation, you have a single dimension to work with. You choose which structure within that dimension you want to use. And because that's the equivalent of a single dimension, this is also the equivalent of using a single structure. Yeah, we realize that you could create a subset that's going to show both roll-ups, but that may end up confusing your users. So I like to think of the OR concept as we're going to use a single roll-up structure, and that's where we would use the existing dimension. Hierarchies, on the other hand, is something that's designed to be viewed in different ways. We just saw in Tara's demo that we could simply right-click on a dimension, and you can show multiple roll-ups of that same set of elements. This is why I like to think of hierarchies as the concept of and. In the old days, the concept of and required special reporting cubes. This increased the number of cubes in your model, it added extra rules. It also required users to know which specific cube or set of cubes to use when you're looking at your data. Hierarchies now allow all of your data to stay in a single cube, and now it gives you the ability to analyze the data in multiple ways. Okay. The second thing that I like to think about when you're taking into consideration is some changes to reporting. Okay. We often receive client requests to create a report that shows an element and a series of related attributes. This happens a lot for things like personnel reports. Maybe you want to show a list of employees, and then you want to show things such as employee type bonus plan, benefits eligibility, things like that. Okay. We also periodically get similar requests associated with products or cost centers, or in essence, anything where we're going to have a report that shows a list of elements going up and down and information about that element left and right. In the past, this type of report was created using DBRA formulas, which means that it limited the report to Excel. Okay. Now, and based on the icon there, is the concept of being freed. Okay. Now, by using hierarchies, we're not limited to Excel anymore. We can now create this report in PAR PACS using a stacked and zero suppressed exploration. We could simply stack each of these attribute hierarchies on the rows, set up zero suppression, and therefore we can now create a simple but dynamic report for our end users. Okay. Now, referencing that concept of dynamic, this now talks about which interfaces can we use. And my parents like to use, they used to like to tell me growing up, there's a time and a place for everything. I like to think hierarchies fit right into this statement because they're currently not designed to work with all types of reports. To me, again, I'm very binary in nature. It's why I like to think about and versus or. It's why I like to think about use Excel or don't use Excel. When it comes to the current interfaces, I like to think about this as PA versus legacy. Okay, where can we use hierarchy? Everything associated with the PA concept. We can use it in PAW. We can use it within the PAX environment. We can use it for explorations. We can use it for quick reports. Where are hierarchies not currently designed to be supported? In the legacy tools, in legacy Excel within perspectives, in the legacy style reporting in PAX, the dynamic and the custom reports. Okay? So one of the things that you want to take into consideration when you're using these hierarchies is to think through what kind of reports am I creating, and more importantly, what interface am I using for these reports? And that will give you the determination of how well the hierarchies are going to be able to help you. Okay. So based on all of that, and if we can go to the next slide, thanks, Ram. We've just talked about a lot of details, okay? And yes, all of this could get very confusing very quickly. And this is where Revelwood is here to help. Whether you're looking to upgrade your environment to Plan Analytics, whether you're looking to train your team on how to use the tool, the new features, Revelwood is experienced in not only implementing the appropriate solution, but more importantly, helping you plan for it, helping you define, plan, and prep what you need. If it turns out that you haven't yet upgraded to Plan Analytics, Revelwood has a phased approach that we've been using with customers to help them work their way up, help them do the definition, help them figure out how we're going to use some of these new features and then roll them out. Revelwood also has decades of experience in regards to training. We offer everything from users to developers to administration, everything from legacy tools to the new planning analytics tools. Okay. So if you have any questions on any of these aspects, we are definitely here to help. Okay. In addition, as we stated earlier, we record all of our webinars and we post them on our YouTube site. Okay. Some of our webinars focus on features, some of them focus on financial concepts, but our ultimate goal is to merge the business and the technical together so that we can offer real-world solutions to the problems that you're trying to solve. I encourage you to visit our YouTube site and watch some of our previous webinars, in addition to this webinar that'll be posted in the very near future. Thank you all very much for joining us today. As we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we'll be reaching out to you, but please contact me if you'd like to schedule a 30-minute complimentary session to discuss anything about your Plan Analytics questions, whether they're associated with hierarchies, whether they're associated with migration, or even basic concepts associated with optimization and business process pieces like that. Thank you again for joining today, and that concludes our webinar.